I would not hold the positions that I hold today if it weren't for counselors. Counselors have made a tremendous impact on my life. I remember being a student at Lompoc High School. My outreach counselor, Manuela Venegas, used to call me into her office every day and she would tell me, Victor, you're going to go to college. I didn't believe her though. I had 3 older brothers who were constantly incarcerated, in and out of juvenile hall, camp, prison. And I remember middle school administrators telling me, you're not going to amount to nothing, you're going to end up just like your brothers. And I believed them. But Manuela Venegas didn't. She told me that I had the potential to be whatever it is I wanted to be, as long as I put my mind to it. She exposed me to things that I had never seen before and taught me things I hadn't learned prior to meeting her. She called it exploring the unknown. It's crazy to think that at 16 years old, I didn't even know how to order from a lunch menu at a restaurant. I didn't even know how to dress up for a formal event, and she taught me that as well. She taught me the importance of getting involved in community service, of speaking up for those who are in need, and I appreciate her very much for that. And that's why counselors play an important role. The gentleman that I'm about to introduce to you today has done the same and much more for the youth in his community. As the board chair and founder of Roses in Concrete, as an associate professor for Raza Studies and Education at San Francisco State University, as the co-founder of the Teaching and Excellence Network, and as a classroom teacher in East Oakland for the past 21 years. His learning style has produced uncommon levels of social and academic success among students. So it is truly an honor to introduce to you Dr. Jeff Duncan-Andrade.
I'm not even going to get on that stage. So let me just start by apologizing for United Airlines incompetence. And I would have been here pretty close to on time despite their incompetence, but then y'all have this little issue with an oil pipeline apparently over in by the airport that they decided was more important than basically any traffic moving through. So I sat in the cab waiting 20 minutes so that they could build an oil pipeline. And got some interesting perspective on that pipeline from the cab driver. So I just want to beg your pardon and thank you for your patience in waiting for me to get here. And it was a long journey here, particularly because yesterday I was in Denver doing some work with community there, sharing palabra with some of the elders there that have guided me on the road, and then also sharing some palabra with young people there, trying to offer some of that wisdom back to them. So got home late, around 1 a.m. last night, and my sons, I have twin boys, Tayari and Amaru, and Tayari caught a fever, and he asked, Papi, can you sleep with me tonight? And so I slept with my sick son last night, and then had to get up early this morning in order to be here. And I say all that only to acknowledge the strength that the elders and the ancestors give to us to do this work. And just as you did, brother, to acknowledge those who helped to put that path down for you, I want to acknowledge those that have made it possible for me to be here today by doing the same thing for me. Our stories are remarkably similar. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and I'll get into a little bit of how that, right, I was the rose that grew from concrete as we get into the talk, but I just want to acknowledge my connection to you just based on your introduction. So, I come from the Opata people, and in our tradition, while I appreciate the invitation to come here in the traditions that I come from, that doesn't actually give me permission to speak. It's a piece of what gives me permission to speak, but in order for me to speak on someone else's land, I have to first acknowledge that we are on indigenous land. And the Radisson may not acknowledge that. Might have some debate. But from where I come from, and the teachings that I was raised with, there is no debate. So I acknowledge that we're on indigenous land, and I ask permission from my indigenous ancestors from this land for permission to share palabra. And then given that permission, I thank those who invited me for giving me permission to come and share palabra with your community. But then I have to ask permission from the elders in this community. And so I understand that there's a couple here that I want to acknowledge who have made so much of this possible, and I'm just grateful to be in the presence of folks who have made it possible for us to speak in this way, my generation. So thank you for all that you've done for this community that's echoing down or up to Oakland, where we're trying to do similar work. And then lastly, I come from traditions that teach us about the 7 generations principle, and acknowledging that I'm not actually the one who's speaking here today. I'm a vehicle, and I'm simply sharing the knowledge and the wisdom from 7 generations of my ancestors that are channeling that wisdom through me. But also acknowledging that the 7 generations principle, in the ways that I was raised, teaches that the 7 generations principle operates in both directions. So we are both always channeling 7 generations of our ancestors, but also must acknowledge our significance and our value, because everything that we do every day echoes 7 generations forward. So my sons and my sons' sons, and you can go on and do that math for 7 generations, will be impacted by our time today. And so given those permissions from the people from this land, the elders, my elders and my ancestors, I'd just like to share a little bit of some of the work that we've been trying to do in our community in the hopes that it might re-inspire you and support you to continue on your journey in this community. So, as I said to my brother here earlier, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And as the youngest, I often felt like it was my birthright to complain about pretty much everything. And I remember one time I came in the house and I was ranting and raving about something, and my mother stops me in the middle of my rant and she points at the kitchen table and she says, "Sit down." And she goes in the kitchen and she gets a glass and she fills it halfway with water, and she comes back and she sits down at the table with me and she puts the glass between us. And she points at the glass and she says, "Half full or half empty?" And my mom's was always good for those kind of trick questions where there is no right answer, so whatever answer you give is the wrong answer, and that's the lesson that I'm going to give you right now. So I just stared back blankly. I didn't take the bait on this particular occasion. And she says, "Son, how you choose to answer that question is how you will live your life. Because your life will always be both half full and half empty. And if you choose to see your life as half empty, if you choose to see your life for all the things that you don't have, you'll never fill your cup. But if you can see your life as half full, if you can see your life for the things that you do have, you will fill your cup, it will overflow, and you can share that with others." Now, this is precisely what I think that Tupac Shakur means when he talks about young people growing up in poverty as the roses that grow from concrete. Now, you can come down anywhere you want on Pac. Cornel West says, "No one free of spot or wrinkle." Right? And I agree. I think Tupac deserves to be critiqued for some of the things that he said and some of the things that he did and some of the ways that he lived his life. But who doesn't? Right? What is undeniable to me as a community member on the 3400 block of East Oakland, as a father who's raising 2 brown boys in one of the most violent communities in the United States, as a teacher that has served in my community for 24 years, hey, this is the problem with bios. As soon as they read it, it's outdated. Hey, this is my 24th year serving young people and families in my community. And as a researcher that studies the practices that are most effective for young people that schools have historically and continually failed, I challenge you to find anyone in late modernity that has had the reach to teach that Tupac Shakur has had, particularly for the young people that are most disconnected from school. I can tell you as a high school English teacher that I can take a crisp $100 bill and I can stick it inside of any Shakespearean text, and I can leave that text anywhere in my classroom and it is completely safe. Right? But if I take Tupac's book of poetry. A lot of people don't know Pac wrote a book of poetry. That's actually the title of his book of poetry. It's also the title of probably his best known poem. If I take this book and I leave it anywhere in my classroom, it is immediately snatched up by students. And I'm talking about the very same students that the system is convinced aren't interested in literacy. Okay, what I tell teachers, what I tell principals, what I tell counselors, what I told Arnie Duncan to his face is that it's not that young people aren't interested in literacy. It's that they're not interested in the literacy we're giving them. Okay? And those are two fundamentally different ways to frame the challenge of re-engaging our children. Okay? About 12 years ago, I started doing work with the Maori community in New Zealand. And for those of you that are not familiar with the indigenous politic of the globe, the Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. And if we had a map of the world up, okay, and I put a pin on my block, 3400, 3416 Davis Street, okay, East Oakland, and then I took a pin and I put it in Otara, which is the community just outside of Auckland where I went 12 years ago to begin working with Maori youth and educators. It is literally the other side of the world. Okay, so I'm not being hyperbolic here when I say I was on the other side of the world. And my first meeting was with a group of about 30 high school Maori youth. And I walk in the room, and this one young brother, they're all sitting in a circle, and this one young brother hops up and he runs up to me and he says, "You're from Oakland?" And I was like, "Yeah." He says, "Did you know Tupac?" And I'm like, "Nah, bro, not everybody in Oakland knows each other like that." But it was so deep to me that I was all the way across the world. And the first question out of a young person's mouth is about Tupac. So you can come down however you might like to land on Pac. But what I want to understand as a teacher, as a community member, as a father, as a researcher, is what is it about Pac's message that has been so transcendent? Okay? And how do I distill that out in my work with young people to make my classroom and my conversation as compelling to them as Pac's work has been? So as a way to frame up the way I understand what it is about Tupac's message that is grabbing so many young people, I'm going to actually play him reading this poem. So Pac actually read this poem on multiple tracks that he laid. The one that's probably the best known is a song called "Mama's Just a Little Girl." Okay? And at the end of that song, over the beat of that song, he reads this poem. So I'm going to play that for us right now to kind of frame up the conversation that I'd like to have today.
But to ask us about we're trying from bad to worse is to ignore from which we came. You see, you wouldn't ask why the roses that grew from the concrete had damaged petals. On the contrary, we would all celebrate its tenacity. We would all love its will to reach the sun. Well, we are roses. This is the concrete. And these are my damaged petals. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. Thank God. Ask me how.
Now, Pac's message here is the same message my mother was delivering to me at the kitchen table that day. What Pac is pointing out is how absurd it would be if you walking down the street with the homie and you see a rose growing in the concrete and you stop the homie like, "Look, a rose growing in the concrete." And the homie looks back to you and is like, "Yeah, but what a shame, it's got damaged petals." Of course it has damaged petals, fool, it's growing in concrete. But we do this all the time with young people, don't we? Right? We see them for their damaged petals instead of for their tenacity and their will to reach the sun. And they have both. Right? Every child that we work with, every young person that we work with, every person that we work with is a glass half full and a glass half empty. Everybody in this room, self included, glass half full, glass half empty. And you know as well as I do that the people in your life who start their relationship with you around your half-empty side, all the things you don't have, all your deficiencies, you check your watch on that person. You spend as little time with that person as you have to, and as soon as you can punch out, you punch out. And then there's people in your life that see you as a glass half full. They see you for all that you do bring to the table. And it's not that they don't acknowledge that you're also a glass half empty, but first they see you for your tenacity and your will to reach the sun. They see you for your value. And with those people, you don't clock watch. With those people, you come on weekends. With those people, you work extra hours. Okay? That is a choice. We choose how we see the children and the young people and the families that we serve. We choose. And that decision has a massive impact on how then those young people see the institution, see us, and see the capacity of that institution to actually help them realize their dreams. And that could not have been made more clear than through the introduction. Right? He had multiple counselors. Right? It wasn't the counselor. It wasn't the role of counselor. It was the choice that those individual human beings made when they saw this brother. And the person that saw him for his value, okay, then he bought in. And the person that saw him for what he didn't have, okay, he stepped out. Okay? And so the sooner that the institution and the adults inside of that institution owns our responsibility to change how we see the people that we serve, okay, then we can start pressing harder on the community to change the way in which they interact with us. The people with the most amount of power need to change first. Okay? And what has always happened in our institutions is the burden of change has always rested on the people with the least amount of power. Okay? Now, if we're going to do this, then we do need to understand damaged petals. We do need to understand the concrete. You can't grow a rose garden if you don't understand the conditions in which you're trying to grow those roses. Of all the stuff I've read, all the experts I've met with, nothing has more consistently impacted my practice, my day-to-day practice, than this film series. It's a 6-part film series from PBS. It actually has like 8 or 9 parts now because it's had such a big impact across fields that they've continued to make more extensions of the series. But it has a great website, tons of resources for teachers, counselors, young people. I know kindergarten teachers that use this all the way up to university faculty. Okay? And it is a global study. This documentary film series it's the largest global study ever conducted on the impact of inequality. Okay, and so the question, right, that these folks were investigating is inequality making us sick? Short answer, yes. Okay, widely agreed upon across fields: public health, social epidemiology, neuroscience, child development, psychology. Okay, all agree. Okay, the biggest threat to health on the planet is inequality. So if you want to build a healthy campus, a healthy school community, a healthy counseling department, a healthy community, you have to eradicate inequality. Otherwise, you're just playing games. There is no debate about this in any of those fields. And that means eradicating all forms of inequality. No oppression Olympics. All forms of inequality on the table all the time. Any form of inequality completely and totally odious and unacceptable because it is a threat to wellness and health for the community and the people that live there. Now, I'm not from this community, so I cannot tell you where that work needs to begin. Right? That is the work that you have to do. The most successful educators that I'm around are first and foremost ethnographers of the communities that they serve. They understand where their students come from, they understand where they go home to every night, and they're present when the sun goes down. If you're not present when the sun goes down, then it changes the ways in which you understand what students are actually bringing to the campus, both the assets and the struggles. Now, what I can tell you is there is a significant body of research about the various different inequality threats to health that are manifesting all over the planet, but that are particularly prominent in the United States because of the radical way in which inequality operates in this country. Okay, so I put this up just to let you know that for pretty much any form of inequality, there is a significant body of research that can inform you how this actually affects the body, how it affects the brain, how it affects the biochemistry and the neural pathways of the students that you serve. And to the degree that you can understand that, you can respond more effectively. Now, what I can tell you is that in my community, the one that trumps most all of these with a high level of frequency is violence. Now, in 2006, the San Francisco Chronicle called itself so concerned with homicide in my community, they started mapping it. And they said that we have the plague, which I find interesting because, as I told you, I live in a 3400 block, so I live right about there. Okay? So if we had the plague, guess what? Y'all would be in trouble right now. Because the plague is the ultimate non-discriminator, isn't it? It doesn't recognize race. It doesn't recognize class. It doesn't recognize gender. Right? And it certainly doesn't recognize political boundaries. But those red lines that just popped up are the political boundaries of our city. And as you can see, our plague has been almost perfectly quarantined between the 580 and the 880 freeways, what we call the flatlands or the lower bottoms. Right? And you don't got to be a topographical genius looking at this map to see the outlier. What is it? Piedmont. What the hell is going on in Piedmont where they can completely opt out of the plague? Just be like, nah, I'm cool. I pass. Right? Cornel West jokes that Disneyland brags nobody's ever died on their premises. He says somebody probably has. They just push them across the line to keep their record clean. Right? And I think that's what happened right there. Right? That was almost certainly in Piedmont. They're like, nah, give that back to Oakland. One more for them. They won't care. Now, if you've ever been to Oakland, if you know folks, we call Oakland the town, so if you know folks from the town, right, if you are currently Googling Piedmont on your phone, right, you are not allowed to answer this question. Right? Who lives in Piedmont? They just came right out with it, right? Who lives in Piedmont?
White people.
Okay. Which white people?
Like the yuppies.
Okay. She said yuppies. Okay. Code for, right, rich white people. Right? Now, several people were echoing that. How y'all know that? I mean, you said it with such confidence. It's the worst kept secret in the nation. That if you are white and wealthy, you are guaranteed safety, even inside of war zones. Now, who lives between the 580s and the 880s? Who lives in the flatlands and the lower bottoms? Okay. Black and brown folks. Which black and brown folks? Okay. Mostly poor and working class and poor white people. There is one poor white dude in the flatlands of East Oakland. Right? I'm just kidding. There's more than one, right? But I got one on my block. He comes out, he says, hey, who the hell? Oh, that's just Willie. What's going on, Willie? He's got his Raiders gear on, so he gets a pass. Okay. And you can draw this map for this community. Right? This is the value of mapping, right? You can structurally, right? It becomes so clear that this has to be by design. There's no way this could be by accident. Right? And every community we go into, we see this kind of mapping of toxic stress and inequality, what sociologists refer to as unearned suffering. Okay? Suffering is a part of the human condition. Right? Every human being, right, is supposed to suffer. But hey, when you get into conditions of radical inequality, what happens is that some people take their earned suffering, the suffering that you have to go through as a human being, and they excuse themselves from that. But because suffering is a zero-sum game in any human population, that suffering doesn't go away. Right? It gets added on to the burden of other people. And that is what we refer to as unearned suffering. That is unearned suffering. Just as that is unearned safety. And as long as that is what... So if y'all knew that, y'all ain't from the town, you're not from Mike, but you knew with total confidence, who else do you think knows? Children. So children walk into our schools and are told, if you just work hard and study and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can be the president. You can run your own company. And at one level, that's true, right? But at another level, it is a complete and absolute denial of that reality. Okay? And that pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps when you have no straps on your boot, okay, is very different, okay, than when you live in this community and your bootstraps don't even require you to bend over to pull on them. Okay? And that acknowledgement of the radical inequality, right, that failure to acknowledge that false hope that is pumped into kids without acknowledging, okay, the incredible structural design of inequity and opportunity in this country is why kids reject school. Because we lie. We lie to children for 13 years. Right? And schools should be about truth and reconciliation. That is the only way that we're ever going to be able to achieve a pluralistic, multiracial democracy if we start telling the truth. This is the only industrialized nation in the world that has committed 2 genocides. Committed a genocide against indigenous people and committed a genocide against African people, and we still deny it. We still don't acknowledge that we committed genocide. We don't say it. We don't teach it. How many of you know who Brian Stevenson is? You ever heard of Brian Stevenson? Okay, check out his work. For my money, he has the most sophisticated, tight, public analysis of race and white supremacy in the country right now. He did a great interview on like MSNBC or CNN, something that was just like such a lasered, right, really accessible analysis about how race operates in the United States. Brian Stevenson's a black man from the South, and he's also the most successful death row lawyer in the United States right now. Right? You want to really see white supremacy operating, go to death row. Right? There it is. Okay? And so his work on death row has become, internationally known. And so he's been on this kind of, global speaking tour, and he tells a story about how Germany, the nation state of Germany, flew him out to do a national lecture series in Germany. And so he's going to all these different cities in Germany, and with each city, he's getting toured around and escorted by German dignitaries. And so they're going around, and everywhere he goes, he keeps seeing these like amazing, beautiful, new monuments. But they're always in German, and he can't read German. So he's noticing this pattern. So eventually he gets to his third or fourth city, and he turns to this dignitary, showing him around. He says, I see these in every city. He said, what are these things? And he says, come here. He walks him over to it, and he starts reading what's inscribed on this monument. And it says, on this date, at this time, the German government murdered 462 Jewish citizens. And Brian Stevenson turns back to him and he says, who pays for that? And the elected official looks at him like he's crazy. And he says, we do. And Brian Stevenson looks back and he says, why? And he looks at Brian Stevenson again like he's crazy. He says, because the only way to make sure it never happens again is to make sure nobody forgets it happened. And Brian Stevenson was like, oh, that's fucking brilliant. Of course, right? Death dodging, death ducking, death denying, nation state. Admit your shit. Isn't that what we tell kids to do? Admit what you did, apologize, and our most powerful people never do it. So kids are like, why I gotta do it? You don't do it, teachers don't do it, principals don't do it, superintendents don't do it, college professors don't do it. Why I gotta do it? So he goes back to the South, and he starts meeting with all these elected officials in the South. He says, I got this great idea from Germany that we should create monuments that say on this place, on this date, at this time, the U.S. government murdered 400 indigenous and African people. How do you think that's going for them? No monuments up yet. Okay? No way in hell we're going to get a generation of young people to speak truth if we don't create the conditions in school to be about first and foremost truth and reconciliation. We don't have to have an answer or an explanation for why we did what we did. We just need to say we did it. And then create the conditions for young people to figure out what are we going to do in this nation state to confront that history so that we can move forward and become a pluralistic, multiracial democracy. Now, in 5 years, we had 555 homicides in my community, city of a little over 400,000 people. In 2009, the San Francisco Chronicle gave up and the Oakland Tribune started mapping homicide. Now every year on the front page of our local newspaper, we have what's called the homicide map printed. And this is the names, the faces, and the places of everybody who's been murdered in our city. And as you can see, there's been almost no stemming of the tide. These are 4 of the most recent maps. Hey, no edging back. And so I decided that I would update the homicide map. And I'm going to do that for 13 years. Because that's how many years young people are actually in school before they come to y'all. Before they come to me at the university. This is 9 years, y'all. This kid is walking into my high school freshman English class. And you tell me, where can a young person live in my community where they have not personally witnessed homicide, if not multiple homicides? My sons are 3.5 years old. By the age of 2, they had already watched our neighbor get murdered in the street right in front of our house. There's no escaping. Pharaoh's on both sides of the Red Sea. In so many of our communities. And yet, what's the conversation in school about? Test scores, college going, college to career pathways, linked learning, all of which matters. Of course that, what a hypocrite I would be, standing up here with a Ph.D., saying that test scores don't matter. But for what? How are test scores, how are the things that we're testing actually relevant to the material conditions of our lives? How is what you're teaching me going to help me stop murders in my community? Stop police, state-sanctioned authorities from shooting my people down? How is school relevant to the most pressing issues in my life? And that disconnectedness is what disconnects the heart work from the head work. And when the heart work and the head work are disconnected, it's impossible to be fully present with your whole self in the work of intellectualism. Now, what we know is exposure to this kind of violence causes PTSD, but what I want you to understand about the research on PTSD is that it's not just homicide that causes PTSD. All those things that I listed, income inequality causes PTSD. People don't understand this, right? Instability in your home, right? In whether or not you have a stable home, right? If you keep having to move all the time, if ICE keeps fucking with your neighborhood, right? Where literally your own humanity is in question, right? That literally causes trauma in your brain and your body. Right? Patriarchy, right? Male dominance, heteronormativity, heterosexual dominance, right? Class dominance, right? White supremacy. These things literally toxify the body. There is no debate about this, y'all. None. Zero in the medical research. Public health, social epidemiology, neuroscience, they don't debate this. Okay? So if we're going to be research-based institutions, if we're going to be data-driven institutions, okay, then we need to start acknowledging the fact that the research is crystal clear about the existence of these things and how they affect our bodies and our brains. But the conversation about PTSD has been largely focused on this dude. Which is right, because soldiers, we know, are particularly prone to PTSD. Okay? But nobody's talking about these brothers. These are my students. This is me on the camera, and this is us burying another one of my students, a 16-year-old who was stabbed more than a dozen times in the face with a screwdriver about 3 blocks from my house. And that's who buried him. And the next day, we back at school. And what's the conversation in school about? Test scores. Where's your homework? What do you mean you're not serious about being college bound? You're not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? Totally denying when everybody knows how violent our community is. Everybody knows the suffering is going on, and we act as if it isn't even happening when kids walk through our door. Like, you need to be focused. Okay? You try to be focused, fool. Go bury your 16-year-old partner that got shanked up in the face with a screwdriver, and you come and focus on your test. You do that, and then you can tell me that I need to do that. But until you actually get proximity to my pain, right? This is what Stevenson talks about. Get Get proximate to the pain. Get proximate to the suffering if you really want to learn how to respond to the suffering. But the people that are responding to the suffering have so much distance from the suffering. Okay? And what that distance creates is a sympathetic reaction. Like, oh, that's terrible that that happened to you. Okay? But what we know in the research is a sympathetic reaction creates no biochemical response in the body. None. Not for the person you're sympathetic to and not for you. But when you get proximate to pain, when their suffering is your suffering, then you get an empathic and empathetic response. And what we know in the research is when I have an empathic connection to you, I have a biochemical reaction, and so do you. Okay? And that biochemical reaction literally connects us. Right? And our people, our ancestors have always talked about this spirit connection that we make to people. Now we actually have the neuroscience to explain what our ancestors have always known. Okay? So if you need the science, we got it. Okay? If you need the clinical, great, right? But right, our indigenous teachings have already made this clear to us. Now, of all the stuff I've read on the clinical side, this is a really good starting point. If you want to understand the clinical side of how toxic stress affects the body, read Bruce Perry's work. Bruce Perry is considered the nation's leading expert on child trauma, and this book is a great primer for you to begin to understand how what the medical field refers to as toxic stress. Okay, so it's toxic stress that leads to PTSD. Okay? So this will really help you understand in very accessible ways. So he's not in some highfalutin, researchy medical speak. It's a very accessible text that will help you understand the ways in which trauma will manifest in people's bodies. And many of you, right, if you're a person of color growing up in this society, if you're a woman growing up in this society, hey, if you're a lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual person growing up in this society, if you're somebody who grew up in poverty, or if you're a new immigrant, hey, I guarantee you that when you read this book, you will find yourself in it. Okay? I did. And it was really important for me because schools taught me to blame myself for my trauma. Right? When I was in school, all the rage was anger management. Right? And so they put me in anger management class because I was an angry little dude. Okay? Now I'm like, this is mellow. Like, I'm cool now, right? You should have seen me when I was 8. Right? I was angry, right? And they said that was my problem. My problem wasn't that I was angry. My problem what was happening to me that was making me angry. Right? So they let the problem reside in me, right? And I believed them. Because children believe teachers. And I believed them that I had a problem. And so this book, hey, in my 30s, liberated me. Because it made me understand that my reactions as a child were actually totally normal human reactions to what was happening to me at home and in the community. Right? And it allowed me to stop blaming myself. And it allowed me to understand the children that I serve better, allowed me to understand my own sons better. Now, I am quite sure, aim to be a data-driven institution. I hear this all the time. Right? We're going to be data-driven, which I actually think is fantastic. Right? I think it's a wonderful idea that we are going to be data-driven. The problem is that we're looking at all the wrong data. Okay? Now, I got here today because my cab driver knew how to use data. Right? He put the address to this joint into this little thing, right? And it told him how to get here. What happens if he puts the wrong data in? I'm even later than I already was. Okay? And I'm like, dude, you're the cab driver. You from here. You can't get me to the joint. Right? Sorry, I had the wrong data. It's not about being data-driven. It's about being driven by the right data. Okay? And if you're not getting where you want to go with certain groups of students, then change the damn data you're looking at. Stop blaming the students for you putting the wrong address into your GPS system. You don't blame Siri, right, for sending you the wrong direction when you give Siri the wrong directions. So I want us to be data-driven, but I want us to have a much more serious conversation about what data do we need to start looking at to really understand how to make the institutional pivots we have to make to meet the needs of the children and the young people and the families that we have historically not served well. So here's some data for you. This is from the national data set on trauma, on child trauma. Okay? The national data suggests that 1 in 3 urban youth display the symptoms of mild to severe PTSD. 1 in 3. When they compared that to the Pentagon's data from soldiers returning from live combat, literally coming back from war, what they found is that urban youth are actually twice as likely as a soldier coming back from live combat to experience PTSD. And then in 2011, Harvard School of Public Health said actually they don't have PTSD because PTSD stands for what? Post-traumatic stress. Okay? Which makes sense for a soldier because the soldier leaves the battlefield, but what about young people? Right, they're going back into it, right? Constantly, right, re-engaging the battlefield. So in 2011, Harvard School of Public Health released a completely new diagnosis called CPTSD to describe what they're seeing in the bodies and the brains of young people exposed to unrelenting toxic stress. And here's why, okay? Toxic stress and PTSD are so important for us to understand. David Williams, who's also at Harvard School of Public Health, says the biggest threat to health on the planet is the accumulation of multiple negative stressors without the resources to cope. That's your money piece, counselor. Okay? That's your money piece. Multiple negative stressors, no resources to cope. Right? So if you're going to serve young people who are growing up in toxic stress, what do you have to do first? No, that's the mistake we make. Right? We start with the resources. Right? Okay? Identify the stress. Okay? And identifying is acknowledging it. But you have to. But what happens is oh, you're Latino, and you're a Spanish speaker, or you're a new immigrant. Let me get you these services. Okay? We typecast, right? Because it's so much easier that way. We just get the checklist. Oh, you're in remedial math, and you're in remedial. Okay, I got you. Don't worry. Hey, we got you. And students don't feel seen or heard, like, dude, like it's not even about math. I can do math. I flunked math because of the shit that was going on at the house and I couldn't get to class. Math is easy. Life's hard. Can you help me with life? Can you help me eat? Can you get me stable housing? Can you give me some damn financial aid? So if you don't first actually spend time figuring out what are the multiple negative stressors in your students' lives, then you're guessing when you send them the resources. And guessing is not being data-driven. Guessing is guessing. Okay? And unless you have very different experience than me when I go to Vegas. When I go to Vegas, I lose just like everybody else. Because gambling is guessing. Right? And there's some expert gamblers in here who are actually, no, it's not guessing at all, Jeff. There's a science to it, and you're, okay, good for you, okay? But my ass is a guessing gambler, okay? And so I lose, right? And you're gambling with kids' lives now. Now you're gambling with something that matters a whole lot more than that green in your pocket. You're gambling with kids' lives and futures, right? So assess first, what are the negative stressors in their life? And that's the value of that list I gave you. Okay, is that the research is pretty clear about what are the different kinds of stressors that interrupt students' abilities to show up and be their full selves. Okay? And when you identify those, then you start sending them to the resources, if you don't have them personally, right, to begin to allow them to navigate that toxic stress. Okay? So it's not actually the toxic stress by itself, okay, that it causes PTSD. Right? It's the combination of multiple negative stressors with no resources to cope. Right? And this is why Pac's work is so important, because he says, I see your damaged petals. And because of that, you're an even more beautiful rose to me. But we get into this kind of passive-aggressive, racist approach to kids who are coming up in poverty, the pobrecito, right? Like, oh, these poor, nah. Right? That's actually evidence of our resilience. If I can get to college going through this shit, hey, math is a joke. Right? What I had to do to get here should be evidence enough for you about my rigor. Okay? But we don't see kids in that way, right? Because we don't assess and we don't get them to the resources. So here's why. Okay? So I'm going to give you some of the lexicon coming out of the medical discourse so that you can have that clinical conversation to go along with what is fairly commonsensical. Okay? So the medical field describes what happens to the body when you're experiencing stress by using the term allostatic load. Okay? So everybody in this room right now has an allostatic load. Okay? Everybody. Because stress is a natural part of the human condition. There is no, so look, I just want to be clear with everybody. I am not up here advocating that you try to live a stress-free life. Okay? I'm not, right? Because you can't. There's only one group of people on the planet that live a stress-free life. Somebody said it. Dead people. Okay? So don't worry, your stress-free life is coming, right? It's actually guaranteed to everybody in the room. Don't rush it. Okay? So stress is a natural part of the human condition. Right? And when we map stress in the body, this is literally what it looks like, this top one. A normal stress event looks like this. Okay, so I'll give you an example from my life. The first time I asked my wife out, okay, highly stressful experience. Cats joke with my wife all the time. They're like, don't you ever stress out because he flies all over the world, he's staying in hotels, he's meeting all these single people? She goes, no. And they're like, why not? She says, because he has no game. So this is completely true. So my no-game ass is literally over here, like in the corner, trying to pump myself up to go talk to this amazing, beautiful woman, and I'm literally saying stuff to myself like, your mom says you're handsome, your mom says you're handsome, your mom says you're handsome. And I go across the room, and what's going on inside my chest? Right, it's pounding, okay? And that, hey, is my stress response system. Okay? That's my SRS. Okay? That is that. Activity, okay, physiological response over time. Okay? Do I control that? No. That's the first misconception about quote-unquote bad behavior in kids that are experiencing toxic stress. Okay? It is a biological imperative that your behavior changes. Okay? Your body forces it. Your SRS is the single most dominant system in your body. Nothing has more control over your body than your stress response system. It literally dominates everything else. The SRS sucks resources off of every other part of your body to allow you to respond to the stressor. This was something developed in the human DNA and development and processes all the way back to the Serengeti. Okay? It is our most basic system, and so it's the most dominant system. Right? And so under stress, your body releases all these chemicals, okay, so that you can respond to the stressor, okay, and you don't control it. Right? Some people hide it better than others. This is why you can have two kids from the same house experiencing the same stressors, and one is like this, and the other one is bouncing off the walls. Internally, the same thing's happening. They're just coping with it differently. Okay? So, what you will be most familiar with is adrenaline, right? So your body pumps adrenaline. This is why under stress, you're literally faster, you're physically stronger. You hear those stories about people who like lift cars off of people, right? Little skinny ass dudes like me, all of a sudden like lifting up a Ford F-150. Get out from under there, you're good. Okay. Most people that tell that story are bullshitting, but actually, okay, it can happen. You are physically strong, significantly physically stronger under stress. You're physically faster because of this chemical reaction that's happening in your body. Okay? And so that my heart pounding is about my adrenaline, right? Adrenaline's rushing through my body because I'm stressed about going to talk to this woman. Okay? The one you want to be the most concerned with is a chemical called cortisol. Because the medical field has been able to directly link the overproduction of cortisol to the big four unnatural killers in our society. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and cancer. Those are all unnaturally occurring in the human population. The human species does not naturally get cancer. It does not naturally get heart disease. It does not naturally get type 2 diabetes. And it does not naturally have a stroke or high blood pressure. Those are all caused by unnatural conditions. And toxic stress is unnatural in the human species. And this is why it's so devastating to our bodies. Okay? But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about a natural stress event, asking somebody out. Okay? Procreation and the effort to procreate is sex okay, is a natural part, right, of the human experience. So I'm going over, right, to talk to this woman, and I won't tell you what I said because it's not important. Okay? I will tell you what she said, no. Okay? But I'll take yours. Okay? So I write down my number, right? I give her my number. I'm walking away, and as I'm walking away, what's going on inside my chest? Back to normal? Okay? No, okay? But slowly. Okay? And this is what the medical field refers to as the recovery period. So the adrenaline and the cortisol levels that were spiking, right, for me to be able to find the courage, right, to stumble through whatever it is that I said to her, okay, right, then begin to go back to my normal levels. Okay? That is a normal stress response. That is actually good for your body. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about toxic stress. And when we map toxic stress in the body, it looks like this. Okay, I joke with high school teachers all the time because for a high school kid, it's kind of like this. First period, second period, third period, fourth period, fifth period. Now, what do you notice about the slope? Okay, so this time period is the same as this time period. Okay, so let's just talk about this one right here. What do you notice about the slope for this one versus the slope for this one? Right, it's steeper, right? On which side? That's what kills you. It is a radical input of all those chemicals in your body with no recovery period because you're literally bouncing stressor to stressor to stressor, multiple negative stressors without the resources to cope. Okay? You want to see what happens when you have resources to cope? This, right? A gentle recovery period. No resources to cope, it just keeps going like this. Boom, boom, boom. So just imagine this inside your body, right? Pounding on your body, right? Mountaintop, valley, mountaintop, valley, mountaintop, valley. And eventually, right, that happens long enough to you, right? And we start seeing this going on in the body, right? You see these little triangles right here? This is what scientists, right, the medical field mathematicians refer to as deltas. Okay, and what's delta mean, young people? Change. Thank you. Y'all doing a good job over here. Okay, right, it means change, right? And so if we magnified this, right, what you'd see is this is a measuring of the biorhythm, okay? And what you'd see on those deltas is a little wiggle, right? So the lines aren't clean anymore, right? And eventually, right, over time, you really start to see the shifts, right? The lines are really unclean. Right? And eventually, that person becomes this person. This is the hypervigilant student. This is the student who's walking down the hallway and bumps shoulders with somebody who's ready to chuck them right there. Just boom, it's just super quick to anger, super quick to action. Okay? And the reason for that is because they're on high alert all the time, right? Because they're under attack from every single, they're always defending themselves. Okay? And then eventually, right, you become this person. And this is the student who can literally watch violence and be deadpan. Like no emotional response. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they're literally exhausted. They are tapped out. They literally cannot even muster a response anymore because they've just been under so much stress. And this produces in the body what Arlene Geronimus, who's at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor, refers to as weathering. Okay, so when you are experiencing this kind of unrelenting stress, your body is literally weathering from the inside and out. It is literally aging. The Nobel Peace Prize 2 years ago was won by a couple of physicists who discovered something called telomeres. Okay, this is a woman named Elizabeth Blackburn, who's at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. And telomeres, literally, when they found these, right, they literally can tell you how long you're going to live. They can predict, like to a really small window, how long you will live, barring getting hit by a bus, right, something like this, totally unforeseeable, based on how long your telomere is. Okay? That's not what actually won the Nobel Prize. You'd think that shit would, like, they just found, like, I can predict your age, like, that should win a Nobel Peace Prize, one would think. No, it didn't win it. Here's what won it. So they found the telomeres when they were working with this group of women who were experiencing unrelenting toxic stress. Okay? And these were all women who had children with really, really severe mental and physical disabilities. Okay? So it's like 24/7 full-time care responsibilities and not a lot of resources. So these are not wealthy, it's basically all falling on them. Okay? And so when they started studying, they were trying to study like what happens to the body, right? When it's just, the stress never ever ends. And when they were studying these women's bodies, like these are like, 35, 40-year-old women, but inside of their body were the bodies of like 65-year-old women. And and this is when they found the telomeres, because in healthy people, the telomeres at that age were much longer. But for these women, right, they had literally lost decades off their life. Okay, and that's how they discovered the telomere. But that's not what won the prize. So they're like, man, this is fucked up, that we're literally publishing all this stuff, right, on the suffering of these women. What are we going to do to actually help them? And so they asked the women, they're like, what can we do to support you? And they said, we just need time. We just need some time to chill them out. Okay? And they're like, okay, cool. So they used some of their research money to buy these women full-time caretakers, right, for their children. And then during that time, these women would meet at each other's houses, okay, in circle. In circle, right? It just happened naturally. They started meeting in circle. And they would just like have tea and some, whatever you eat with tea. Okay? And they probably put some little extra stank in the tea to make it little. And they talked. And they held each other. And they cried. And they laughed. Right? No counselor there, no we should talk about, just women, healing women, based on empathic connection. I feel you. How many of you have students that say, I feel you? They mean it, I feel you, right? What they are literally narrating is an empathic, I feel you, right? It's not hip hop, right? It's literally them acknowledging an empathic connection. So these women are feeling each other. And so the researchers are feeling all good about it, right? And they're doing this consistently, right? And they're continuing to do the research. And then guess what happens? Their telomeres start growing back. They literally found the fountain of youth. They started gaining years back on their life. And that is what won the Nobel Peace Prize. Responding to toxic stress through empathy and healing literally saves lives. You know who acknowledged this? The Nobel Peace Prize. That is the highest prize you can get for impact research in the world. And we're not talking about it in schools. Even though we know, right, that kids are coming into those conditions with their telomeres and their health and well-being under attack because of toxic stress and inequality, and we know what to do about it. But, we got to get test scores up because, that's not academically rigorous, saving somebody's life, right? When in fact what the research suggests is that's actually the pathway to college, right? Well-being, right, is the first thing you got to deal with for a kid's test scores to come up. So this is generally where people are at this point in the talk. My mother is 87 years old, and she has recently discovered email, which means that I get updates on Jesus all the time. Okay? I'm informed when he's risen, when he's dead, when there's 2 sets of footprints in the sand, and then there's only one. I did this talk at Harvard a few years back. It was me and Arnie Duncan. Arnie Duncan went first, and then I went on after him and explained why everything he said was wrong. And Harvard made a big deal of it, and they put it on YouTube and blasted it all over. And so one of my older brothers gets hold of the YouTube link, and he emails it to my mom. So my mom calls me up and says, hey, son, your brother just sent me the link to your Harvard talk. I'm going to go on, I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to call you back and let you know what I think. I'm like, all right, cool, Ma. So about 75 minutes later, my mom calls me back. I said, what'd you think, Mom? She says, I think you curse too much. Now, the good thing about my mom is she does not text message. Okay? If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's not actually important. Okay? What is important, okay, is that this is not true. We're actually not screwed at all. Okay? As I illuminated with the research on telomeres, hey, we know what to do. Okay? We know what to do. Right? And the long game is we have to eradicate inequality in the society. That is the surest way over time to reduce toxic stress in people's lives. But in the interim, we're not helpless. We're not screwed at all. Okay? There's actually really clear research on why that circle of women, right, changed their health outcomes. And the reason why is because when you are making empathic connections, your hope levels go up. This is literally what the medical field is measuring. It is the only thing that they have found that is directly correlated with the person's ability to navigate toxic stress: hope. And what they found in the research around young people that experience toxic stress, okay, is that hope is directly correlated to only one thing. Only one thing. You know what it is? What is corollary with a young person's hope level?
Optimism?
Okay. No, optimism and hope are not the same thing. Optimism is you look at the existing set of conditions and you believe things will get better. Okay? I don't have very many optimistic days. Hope is when you look at the existing conditions and you believe things will get better anyway. Because there's nothing in the data that suggests we're headed in the right way. All the data suggests we're going the wrong way. Okay? That doesn't make me very optimistic, but I'm eminently hopeful. So what causes hope in young people? Only one thing that they found. Somebody said support? From who? Somebody said it back there? Caring adults. Okay. From caring adults. Okay. Caring adults. Okay. And what is so profound about the research on hope, okay, is it's directly correlated. So the more caring adults a young person can name in their life, the higher their hope levels. And the higher their hope levels, the more successfully they navigate toxic stress. Okay. Now notice what I said and what I didn't say. Okay. I said caring adults. I did not say caring licensed adults. Okay. Because sometimes licensure actually gets in the way. Because you start getting a little too mechanical and technocratic with how you, instead of really making empathic connections, you win the heart to win the head. So put your degree down, right, and make a human connection with young people. And that literally is the single biggest protective factor in a young person's life, is a caring adult. Right? And so everybody in this room matters, even y'all. Okay? Because although you aren't always treated, right, as adults, okay, in the eyes of my sons, you are. In the eyes of a 3.5-year-old or a 5-year-old, right? So your obligation has already begun as adults, other adults, elders or olders, okay, depending on your, how you get down, okay, because being older doesn't make you an elder. We all clear on that? Some people just old. Okay? Elder comes with wisdom, right? My maestro Jerry Teo, right, taught me that. Right? As you get older, it don't make you no elder. Okay? There's some older people in our community that just act even more immature, right, than the 16-year-olds. But y'all, right, can begin, right, doing this work with young people in the community. Understand your value. Do you understand how important you are to my sons? Do you understand that? That you can literally save my son's life with one interaction. So you don't got to wait till you get your degree. That's not what actually makes you a healer. What makes you a healer is the ancestors that you come from. Right? And the institutions will give you a degree that then allow you to make some money off that healing. Okay? But okay, you're already healers. Right? You already have that responsibility in our community. Now, if you look up the word hope in a dictionary, okay, you'll find that it's a dynamic word. I'm a writer and I'm a teacher of literature, so I love words. Right? And if you look it up, you'll find that it's both a noun and a verb. Okay? Very rare. right? To have something that is both a thing and an action. And as I said, it's popping up more and more in the research. I'm particularly fond of the work of Charles Schneider, who developed something he calls hope theory, right? And he actually created something. This is what really started the conversation in the medical field. He created something called the Children's Hope Scale, which is literally a metric to measure children's hope levels that they've been able to correlate to the number of caring adults in their life. My favorite definition actually comes from a presidential professor of public health at UC Berkeley. His name's Lynn Syme. And he defines hope as a sense of control of destiny. Now, I don't know why y'all got in this work, but that's why I got into this work, because I wanted young people in my community to have a greater sense of control over their own destiny. And so what this research has taught me is that what I actually am is not a teacher. What I actually am is a hope dealer. And I'm a hope dealer battling dope dealers. And I'm not talking about the dope dealer on the corner pushing nickel and dime bags. I'm talking about the dope dealers in schools that teach our kids to hate themselves, teach our kids to hate their own language, their own culture, their own community, their own familia, right? Their own people, their own ancestors, textbook companies, right? That pump lies into our student. As James Lowen said, lies my teacher told me. Okay? That's dope. And when that dope gets in your veins and it sits in your veins long enough, then you start getting locked up. Then you go to the corner to get a dime bag or a nickel bag to start dealing with that pain that's been pumped in by the dope dealers. That's when you show up to a dope dealer. You show up with cash to a dope dealer when you already in pain. So if we really want to interrupt the nickel and dime bags on the corner, don't worry about the corner. Worry about the ways in which we teach our children. Worry about these schools that we're exposing them to for 13 years that never teach them their own value, never teach them the greatness of their ancestors, never teach them that there's only 2 places on the planet where there's pyramids. Only 2. How the fuck are black and brown kids failing math? How is that possible? Math is your birthright. Y'all know math is your birthright. We discovered math and taught Europeans math. There's no debate about that amongst anthropologists and historians. None. The debate goes on in schools. Pythagoras himself, the Greek founder of geometry. If you read Pythagoras' original writings, this is why Malcolm X said of all the forms of study, the one that's the most likely to reward your efforts is the study of history, because the truth is lying there. Don't read Pythagorean theorem, read Pythagoras. Pythagoras himself wrote that he went to Africa, the original place for university. How the fuck do we have low college going rates for black kids when African peoples formed the first university? But university is your birthright. Right? You created the concept of university, now you can't get in? That makes no sense. But we don't learn this in school. University is you trying to get into white wealth. When really university is you trying to follow the path that the ancestors already illuminated for you. What do you have to know to build pyramids? But specifically, what kind of math, brother? You got to know geometry. We taught the Greeks geometry. Pythagoras himself says this. He takes that back, teaches white people geometry, and then the colonial project comes, and it comes into Africa, and it comes into what we now know as Latin and South America, and what's the first thing it does after it changes our names and takes our language? It destroys our history. Right? It burns all of our history, all the records, right, in Timbuktu. All the records in ancient Kemet, all the records all throughout the Mexicayo Empire, right? Burns it, right? And they say, we brought math here. We brought science here. But you see, those pyramids are still standing. Peep that game. That's some sick-ass game, right? You talk about engineers, okay? Engineers with the highest degrees in the United States cannot build buildings that will still be standing thousands of years from now. Bet on that. Okay? But our buildings are still standing. And now, as we're starting to uncover them, and we're finding the Mayan Codex, and we're finding the hieroglyphs all throughout Egypt, we're finding math. Math that predates Pythagoras. Okay? So the truth is lying there. But kids don't learn this. Where does the word, and mind you, okay, that Africans had geometry, but they were missing a key concept that you need to build the pyramid. Because it's not just geometry. You have to also understand the concept of zero. Zero. That you can measure nothingness. You can get to a 0 point. And who discovered that? The Mayans. Now, we both built pyramids almost exact same time. There's only one way that anthropologists explain that as having happened, and what is it? They got geometry, we got zero. No pyramids without both. What had to happen? Email. Okay, so we didn't have email, so what did we do? We got in some damn boats, right? And we circumnavigated the globe, which means you also have to have what? Whole other levels of knowledge of the stars, right? Incredible wisdom that people are still trying to figure out. Why do you think I was late today? Right? United, right? And I was like, yo, man, I got some long-standing connections to my Mayan ancestors. I could help you guys get there a little quicker, right? So we've been exchanging for millennia, and we had each other's throats now, beefing over blocks, beefing over petty change because we don't teach in schools that we've always been brothers. Right? Why do you think when you go to the African continent and all throughout Latin and South America that you see all kinds of different hues? You see my hue, you see this brother's hue, you see this brother's hue, you see all different hues, because during the day, what were we doing? We were building pyramids. What were we doing at night? Yeah, y'all nasty, right? Because you know, right? Because you know, right? We've been, right, in bed together for millennia, right? But none of this is taught in schools. Our connectedness, right? Our exchange, our commitment to one another, to building each other's societies, to building each other's blocks, to building each other's lands, to building each other's families, right, is our birthright. Okay? And because schools are not illuminating that, right, we don't pass that on to our children. And that loss of knowledge is literally toxic to the body. Okay? Now, the more that I've learned and the more that I've been taught, okay, and much of this stuff I learned through my my community maestros, okay, but also through folks like the folks that started the Raza Studies program in Tucson Unified. Right? And they taught me about In Lakesh. And that's really what we're talking about here. Now, In Lakesh is a Mayan, right, principle, but it's not exclusive to the Mayan people. And I guarantee you, whoever you come from, wherever you come from, okay, you come from indigenous people. Everybody has indigeneity. And if you track back your indigeneity, right, and this is one of the most powerful projects of the U.S. discipline, is to take our indigeneity away from us. And to act as if history begins in 1776. I don't care who you are, okay, or where you come from. Right? If you track back your indigenous ancestors, original land, original culture, original foods and practices, you will find the same thing that I find when I track my people back to the Mexicayo and Mayan people. That you had a principle just like In Lakesh. And for the Mayan people, the concept of In Lakesh is the smoking mirror. We would teach all our children that every living being you come across is a smoking mirror. That is not the question. The question is whether or not you will muster the courage, character, and commitment to clear the smoke away. Because once you do, what will you see? You will see yourself in every other living being. That is the teachings of the ancestors. Why is that not the core principle in schools? And why is it when that becomes the core principle in schools, the state of Arizona bans the program? They started every single class in the Raza Studies program in Tucson with In Lakesh. Tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other self. I see you as you see me. Why is that a threat to national security? It is a threat to the national security insecurity that we've built. Okay? Because when you see everyone else's humanity, you can no longer oppress them. You can't. And if we learn, if black and brown and white and yellow and purple and pink and Martian learn to start seeing each other, there's Martians among us. Y'all didn't know that? How do you think we built the pyramids? Y'all didn't hear? Aliens. Right? Aliens. Right? If we start seeing each other's humanity, right, then there's no way we can have this kind of radical inequality. And Donald Trump will be seen very differently. Be seen, can you see yourself in Trump? How easy it is. He is us. He's a part of our humanity too, that we don't care to acknowledge or recognize. Right? But we can't go there with him, right? Because we haven't even been taught how to go there with our own people, with our own familia, with our own community members. Right? So the gaps are too big. The way we try to do this in our community, the way we try to build hope, has three strands, what betting people would call a trifecta. And a trifecta is a kind of bet where there's three components of the bet, and if you don't hit on all three, you lose the bet. Okay? So for our thinking, right, critical hope, it has to be attentive to all three of these elements of hope. The first is what we call material hope. This is first and foremost just be badass at what you do. Okay? That is a huge material resource in our community. Be the dopest counselor ever. Be the dopest front office person ever. Be the dopest financial aid counselor ever. Be the dopest teacher ever. Be the dopest big brother ever. Be the dopest big primo ever. Be dopest at whatever it is that you do. Be dope at it. Okay? That is a huge asset in our community. But it won't be enough. You're going to have to supplement that with real material resources. Pay attention, okay, to the students that don't eat. Pay attention to the student. I mean, I know I'm in kind of like Wonderland in terms of weather, right? But when I'm in Denver, I tell them, pay attention to the kid who comes during the snowstorm with like a lightweight Nike windbreaker, right? And give up your North Face coat, right? So that kid can come warm into class and be ready to learn. And then you can go, right, with your whack-ass teacher salary and get, go to the North Face outlet since you can't go to Macy's yet, right? But figure out, right, the young people, right, one of the biggest threats to young people succeeding in schools is the absence of basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, safety. Okay? And when we pay attention to those things, food, clothing, shelter, safety, basic needs, okay, this closes the gap between the most pressing needs students actually have. Their most pressing need is not their math score. Their most pressing need is food, clothing, shelter, safety. When we are attentive to those things, okay, that is when they start seeing schools as being responsive to them. But we've known this since 1943. I am not on to nothing currently being used in schools. Nothing. I'll stake my career on this. Nothing currently being used in schools has the research base that Maslow has. 7 decades of research, cross-disciplinary. All those fields I listed earlier, public health, social epidemiology, neuroscience, the medical field, child development, psychology, all agree. Yep, he's right. Study after study after study. So if you get stuck with the student, okay, don't counsel your way out of it. Maslow your way out of it. Okay? Go right to here. It tells you exactly what to work on. Food, clothing, shelter, safety. You good? Check. Okay. Do you feel a sense of love and belonging? Check. Do you love yourself? Do you know who you are? Do you know who your people are? Do you know who your ancestors are? Do you know your value? Check. Everything else takes care of itself. Self-actualization is the highest performing student. Now, the important part of this research is what we found over the years about Maslow's paradigm, is that this is actually the natural human condition. You don't need to do anything to students to get them to self-actualize. Biologically, human beings naturally self-actualize. You want proof? What'd you do when you were born? The minute you came out of water, right? You were breathing in water. Now you can't swim? Come on, dude. I don't know how to swim. Oh, you swam for 9 months. You came out of water, and what was the first thing you did? Okay. Crying was your pathway to breathing. Who told you to breathe? Doctor was like, oh, you got to breathe, and you were, oh yeah. You naturally you take what you need to survive as a human being. That's what you do. So if a child is not self-actualizing, what the research suggests is there's nothing wrong with the child. Stop trying to fix our kids. They're not broken. What's broken is the system they're growing up in. So that's what you got to fix. So the best teachers, the best counselors, the best caring adults I'm around are bulldozers. They find out what's in the way and they clear it. And then, as this brother articulated earlier, I'm good. That's all I needed you to do, right? Was to clear that stuff out of the way so I can be who I naturally am. But when we look at our kids, we don't see scientists and engineers and mathematicians and doctors and literary geniuses. Right? We see problems. We see community problems. We see familia problems. We see academic problems. Right? And that's the problem. Our kids are not problems. So become a bulldozer. Now, the other thing I have to say about Maslow is that Maslow appropriated this framework from indigenous people. This is actually a framework called the breath of life, which Maslow appropriated from the Blackfoot Nation. So the Blackfoot people actually, and what's interesting is Maslow actually talks about this totally transparently. When he first starts writing, and the academy ignores that part. Right? And they just start lifting up his work. But Maslow acknowledged where he got it from. And there's tons of historical evidence. There's pictures of him at the Blackfoot Nation. In his writing, right, he talks about Blackfoot people, right, and what they taught him. And what's interesting about the Blackfoot paradigm, the breath of life paradigm, is it's inverted. That for indigenous people, this is the base. Okay? And you know why? Because in our communities, pre-contact, did we have to talk about feeding, clothing, sheltering, and providing safety for our children? Hell no. That was automatic, right? So these didn't need love and belonging, self-esteem, automatic, right? Just based on the way we built our society, right? And so Maslow acknowledged that that is the ideal society, where you come out of the womb and you self-actualize and you grow into all these other things naturally because of the natural conditions in the society. But he acknowledged that the society we have built has to invert this. You actually have to say you have to feed children in this society. That's how we have to create safety for children. That's how messed up our society is. So Maslow's paradigm, what I encourage you to do is a mixing of medicines. Okay? Maslow is the clinical side, and we need some clinical responses because of how sick we are as a society. Second is Socratic hope. Cornel West talks about a Socratic sensibility, right? And the way he describes that is that he says young people don't want to hear any more sermons. They want to see one. So just understand, if you are an adult, young people, working with the little ones, your sermon is not what you tell them to do. It's the way you live your life. That is the most important part about what you teach your younger brothers and sisters and cousins and familia. Not what you say, what you do. They're watching you all the time. So be aware, right, that everything you do is sacred. Maya Angelou says words are things. Every word you speak is the thing you put into the universe. Right? So own the words and the actions that you take. Your greatest pedagogy is the way you live your life. Right? And if the way you live your life matches up with your teachings, students will listen. But when you're telling them to do something and you live your life in a completely different way, the volume goes to zero. Why? Because you're a hypocrite, and no one listens to hypocrites. Okay? For me, this is the difference between being liked or being loved. Okay? And this line, right, is not a fine one. Okay? This is the difference between sympathy and empathy. And what I find is that a lot of people working in our communities are outsiders to our community. And they know they're outsiders. And so they just try to keep it cool with everybody. They're like Switzerland, right? They just don't want no beef with anybody, right? Just keep it cool, right? Because they have come to believe, right, that love is the absence of conflict. And they learned that from Hollywood. One movie in particular, The Notebook. That's it. Like, you watch The Notebook, that's love, right? Just 70 years we together, and at the end, we just fall asleep together in bed, and we both die. And nobody, this is it, okay? We just go, that's love. And if you ain't got that, you ain't got shit. Okay? And so every time we get into conflict, we're like, man, this must not be love. This must not be the... Nah, love is not the absence of conflict. Love is the presence of conflict with the courage, character, and commitment to find your way through. And if you... I'll prove it to you. How many of you have ever had a personal relationship go bad? Okay, young people just jack their hand up, right? Right? I did this talk in Texas. You can imagine how I go over in Texas. But it's all right because I was in Austin, which isn't really Texas. And it was like all of Austin unified, all their teachers, like 2,000 teachers. And I asked that question, and 1,999 people raised their hand, and one person lied. And there was mics set up down the row for the Q&A period, and this one woman is sitting right on the aisle, and she reaches over and grabs the mic and goes, yeah, and he's right there. Yeah, that was exactly my response. I was like, go ahead, this would be way more interesting than anything I have to share. Y'all want to see some trauma, here it comes. Okay? So I'm talking about the one where you got your heart stomped out. I'm talking about the one where you fundamentally doubted love. Okay? After you got crushed, who paid for your pain? Oh, somebody just came right. I don't know who it was over here. Look, she's even volunteering. She's like, the next one. Right. Yours must be fairly recently, or you. Oh, she's like, this is a long time ago. I still harboring that shit, huh? Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Right. Right. We even have a term for it in our society. It's called the rebound. Right? And all the people closest to you were catching all this lateral trauma, your pain, because the natural human instinct is to protect yourself. And that's why this work is so damn hard. And people are not honest with youth workers about how hard and painful this work can be. Because you're catching all this trauma and you just loving on them and loving on them. And you got your heart out there and they're stomping on it because they're hurting hurt people. And so you get your heart stomped on often enough and you put your heart away. But if you are back again in a caring and loving relationship, it's not because you went back into that relationship and you're like, I know we just met, we should really think about getting married right now. You went into arm's length, protecting yourself. And if you are now in a caring, loving relationship, it's because that person gently pushed your arm down and said, that's all right. That ain't me. And I know you're coming with some baggage, and we can unpack that one piece at a time until we get through it all. And then 6 months later, they said, and by the way, I have some baggage too. Can we get to mine now? You're going to have conflict with the youth you serve. That's the evidence and the opportunity for love. And we resent them for it. The most wounded children tell the most truth. And we resent them for it. Instead of acknowledging that that pain, that truth is my opportunity to love you more fully. But in order for me to do that, you got to love me as my colleague. You got to acknowledge me when I'm heavy. We got to know, and the institution divides us. We sit in our offices, we sit in our departments, right? We're not locking arms. And because we don't lock arms, the young people don't see how to lock arms. And they think that being a mature, adult professional is about you handling all your own shit all by yourself. And then they carry that into relationships. And when that relationship gets funky, they can't find their way through because it's not the Notebook. That's why modeling that amongst each other is so powerful in teaching young people how to do it. And that, y'all, is why teachers and counselors drink. That always gets the biggest applause. Like, cats want to stand up and be like, yes, preach! And I know, like, this is, community college, but we hydrate, okay? We drink water. Third is audacious hope, because if you're going to do this, if you're going to do what I'm talking about, right, you better be audacious. You better believe that you can do things and that we can do things that we frankly have not done in these institutions. And the way we think about this is by talking to each person, right, as if they're a gardener. Okay? And the gardener digs where they stand. And the gardener never blames the seed for not growing. The gardener understands that the seed doesn't grow, it's because I got the soil wrong. And they go back and they rework the soil. And they pay attention to what does that seed need. Because what I was giving was not what that seed needed to grow. And if you're a gardener, and 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 you're a gardener, what do we have when all of you grow your seeds? We got a garden. Okay? The only way to grow a garden in the institution is if everybody's digging like a gardener. The best example I've heard of this and how this is possible actually comes from a medical doctor. A woman named Cameron Jones, black woman who is on the teaching faculty at Columbia University's Medical School in New York. And she had just been hired there, and her and her husband bought a brownstone, and they're walking up the stairs to the house, and they get to the door, and she turns to the right, and there's a window there, and underneath the window there's a flower box. She turns to her husband, she says, that should be the first project that we do at this house, because that's going to be the first thing that people see when they come to visit. And her husband, like any smart partner, says back, yes, dear, brilliant. You're always one step ahead of me. Right? So that weekend they go to the gardening store, and she buys a packet of flower seeds and a bag of soil. And she comes back, and as she's going to put the soil into the flower box, she leans in and she realizes there's a partition splitting it in half. And on one half, there's already soil. So she takes the fresh soil and she dumps it in on the empty side. And then she takes the packet of flower seeds and she splits it in half, and she needs half of the seeds in the new soil and half of the seeds in the soil that was already there. And she says over the next several weeks and months, she paid special attention to make sure that both sides got plenty of water and plenty of light. And she says what happened next was the most important medical discovery of her career. Because on the side with the fresh soil, all of the seeds grew. Full height, vibrant colors, and they made space for each other in the box. But on the other side, she realized that that soil was old, and it was devoid of some key nutrients, and it was rocky. And on that side, only a few seeds grew. And they only grew to middling height, and they crowded each other in the box for the few resources that were available. And she says, what I realized in that moment is how much place matters. That's how much you matter. You, no matter what you do, where you do the work, you can create place that nurtures young people that need nurturing. Okay? Don't wait for the institutional initiative. Don't wait for your department chair or for your new hire. Do the work now. Okay? Dig where you stand. Okay? And as you dig where you stand, other gardeners will see their capacity to begin to dig where they stand. Now, I've been trying to do this. I've been trying to be a gardener in my community for 24 years. And in 24 years, I have never had a perfect year. I have never had a perfect semester. I've never had a perfect grading period. I've never had a perfect unit. I've never had a perfect month. I've never had a perfect week. I've never had a perfect day. And I've never had a perfect class period, ever, in 24 years. But I wake up every day expecting to, knowing that I won't. And in order to do that, to last in this work, you must be audacious. You must believe that you will do tomorrow what you did not do today or yesterday. Now, few people in my life have modeled this as well as Maya Angelou. So I'm going to end with a story that she tells that I think best captures what I mean by critical hope. And I have next to her picture this book by my colleague Sean Jenright. Okay? And I have Sean's book up here because of the subtitle. He uses the word radical healing. And I believe that great teachers and great counselors and caring adults are indeed healers. But in radical conditions, it's not enough to be a healer. You have to be a radical healer. You have to heal beyond the ways in which you've thought about healing, because radical conditions demand a radical response. And the young people that are struggling the most in our institutions right now are experiencing radical conditions. And our response from the institution has been measured, step and sequence instead of a radical change. Okay? The move that we have to make is not a soft pivot. If you guys make a soft pivot, you will not move the dial. You have to make a hard pivot. The move to equity and justice and freedom is a hard pivot, and it demands that we take risks in our position that we have not historically taken. And so what you're going to hear in this story that Maya tells is, for me, one of the best examples, real life examples I've heard of what I think about when I think about critical hope and radical healing.
Allan was doing his movie, Poetic Justice. And he asked, would I come out to Los Angeles and do a Keynote? I walked out of my trailer that morning, and there was one young man cursing, like you could see the blue come out of his mouth. And then he and another fellow, they were at each other's throats. They had each other's clothes. So I went up to one young man, and I said to him, excuse me, may I speak to you? He said, I wouldn't give him. I said, I understand that. But may I speak to you for a minute? He said, if these moves, I said, I've heard that before. But do you know how important you are? Do you know that our people slept, lay spoon fashion in the filthy hashes of slave ships, in their own and in each other's excrement and urine and menstrual flow, so that you could live 200 years later? Do you know that? Do you know that our people stood on auction blocks so that you could live? He said, I said, no, but that's when's the last time anyone told you how important you are? And he started the tears started to come out. I had no Kleenex or anything, so I just wiped his face with my hands and talked to him. And Miss Janet Johnson came. She said, Angela, I don't believe you actually talked to Tupac Shakur. So I didn't know Tupac Shakur. I didn't know Six Pack. Because in my life and my age group, you understand, I didn't know that. Tupac's mother wrote me a letter. She said her son had called her right after I had spoken to him. And she wanted to thank me. She said, you may have saved his life, and I thank you, Dr. Angela.
In that one story, she painted a more human picture of him than the entire media did during his career, you know. People were afraid of Tupac. The media made him like he was a scary thing, and she talked about him like he was a young man in a confusing and difficult situation. And that's kind of what I like about Dr. Angela. Because I know I'm not perfect and whatever, but it's something that she can look at me and she can kind of put the picture together. She knows I'm just a dude trying to figure it out.
Each of us has a chance to be somebody. And it's my delight that you would ask for me so that I can have the pleasure, the joy, the thrill of talking to you so that I can be somebody.
For me, that's a master teacher. That's a master counselor. Right? And the people that I see struggling to connect to our young people are the people who don't want the mess. They want it to be sanitized and clean. Okay? The meaning is in the mess. Every deep, meaningful relationship you have is deep and meaningful because you went through some mess with that person. And it's not going to be any different with young people. Right? It's going to be messy. This is why every single indigenous society has had some version of the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. Because to clean up all that mess, right, that is adolescence and young life, right, requires a whole village, so you won't do it by yourself. right? And this is why really figuring out what the stresses are on a young person's life, handling the ones that you can handle, and connecting them to other resources is the surest pathway to them finding success. Now, Maya intervenes in Pac's life circa 1991 on the set of Poetic Justice. Okay? And according to Tupac's own mother, because she makes that decision on a movie set, this is a Nobel Peace Prize nominee in literature, a grandmother, a national treasure on a movie set, walks out of her trailer and sees what? Two people about to fight. Who does she see about to fight? She sees Tupac. No. She doesn't see Tupac. She says herself, I didn't know who Six-Pack was. Okay? But see, this is what happens with story, right? It's like, oh yeah, she saved Tupac. No, she didn't. Who does she see? Two black boys. No way in hell you see two black boys on a movie set, you're a Nobel Peace Prize nominee and a grandma, and you're like, whoa, 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 y'all can't fight? No way. If you see two black boys, what do? Run. She said run. Wow, you all got issues here, right? Just the truth, just run. You call security. You call security, just like we do in schools all the time. No, let security handle that. Okay? Who does she see? In Lakesh, she sees her own sons. And if you have children, you know exactly what I'm talking about right now. If your sons or your son was about to get in a fight, okay, there would be absolutely no calculus. There would be no 911 call security. You are the security. We are Homeland Security. Okay? You would be in there in a quickness, not thinking about your safety or... Because at that moment, your safety doesn't matter. It's your son. She sees her son. And so there is no thinking. There is no what steps do I take now, right? It's instinct. Okay? And that's the problem, is that when we look at him, we don't see our son. We see a student. We see a number. We see a Latino kid. We see a Hispanic. I see my son when I see you. And I know in order to save my son's life, I have to find a way for you to understand your own value. And so she speaks his value into him. And his initial reaction is what? Oh, thank you so much. I didn't really want to fight, dude, anyway. You just saved me an ass whooping. What's his initial reaction? Not fight back. What does he literally do? He curses at her. He curses her out. And I see this happen all the time. Educators intervene. The student doesn't know how to receive it. They don't even think they want to receive it. And so they resist it. And then the educator's like, well, fine then. Fine. You don't want my help. You're not serious. You come back when you're ready. What abuelita says that? Abuelita's all up in your ear like, boy, do you know who you are? And so she comes back again. Right? She says, no, it's okay. I've heard that before. Because it's not about me. And this work of raising test scores and transfer rates has been all about us, and it's never about the young people. Because when it's about the young people, you go again. And she goes again, and what's his second reaction? He curses again. And she's like, that's okay. I know. Go ahead. Let it out. I can carry that. Because I know who I am. Put that in my maleta too. Come again. Do you know how important you are? And then what happens? Then he starts leaking. Because the rage was out. You got to stay with it. Young people won't always be ready to receive the gift you're offering, so you got to give it again and again and again. And the only way you can do that is if you see them as your own son or daughter. Because then you won't take that rage personally, right? You'll take it as an opportunity to love and heal. So she intervenes in his life in 1991, and according to Tupac's own mother, that decision on that movie set saved his life. The decisions you make every day save lives, or they don't. And because she does that, Tupac goes on to live 5 more years. Tupac is murdered in the streets of Las Vegas in 1996. And if you study Tupac as an artist, what you will find is the period between 1991 and 1996, the 5 years that Maya bought him with that decision on that day, were the most productive artistic years of his life. He wrote so much in those 5 years that they couldn't produce it all. This is why Tupac has album after album after album coming out after he's dead. One of those albums that was written in its entirety in that 5 years was released in 2003. It's an album called Resurrection. And in 2009, my homie snapped this photo in Kathmandu. It is a picture of 3 brothers standing in front of one of the largest Buddhist shrines in the world. And the oldest brother in the middle is turned to the right and he is consoling his middle brother, whose hand is on his head because he is weeping. And their baby brother is watching, learning empathy. And what you might not catch about the photo is the shirt that the oldest brother is wearing. That is the album shirt from Resurrection. That is why you matter so much. It won't always show up in a test score. It won't always show up in a transfer rate. But when you speak that value into your Tupacs, your Tupacs are the ones that are the most likely to come back to the concrete and spill that knowledge and that truth back into the cracks. That's why the young people trapped so deep in the cracks still hear Tupac, because he can see them, and he can see them because he came from the cracks. That's why investing in that particular group of students is so important, because they're the most likely to bust the concrete open and create rose gardens. It ain't gonna come from us. It's going to come from them. We have to create the conditions for them to do the work we have yet been able to do. If I can help you in any way on that journey, please do not hesitate to reach out. If you are sending kids up San Francisco State Way, please reach out. We will connect them in ethnic studies. We will connect them to a group of people in a network that will hold them up there while they're away from their people down here. What I can tell you as somebody who has the privilege to fly all over the country and work with teachers and work with young people is something's going on right now. Something's going on right now that is largely a reaction to the total and abject failure of No Child Left Behind. And there's very different conversations happening right now. And there's a lot of different people angling to be the next main thing in schools. And it's not clear yet what's going to land in there. There is a huge opportunity for us right now to reclaim the education of our children because of that void. But if we don't rally collectively, if we don't understand that something's going on that we can connect to that's bigger than ourselves, then they'll win again. The oldest strategy of war is divide and conquer. And we are so divided in the ways in which we've been trying to organize our communities. So please, if we can support in any way, reach out and connect to other folks that aren't just in your community, but that are doing this work around the country, and let's reclaim our schools for our babies. Thank you. Thank you